Today, I want to start videos on communication and language in autism. And we will start with communication. But before I begin, I'd like to clarify something that I will talk about autism before DSM-5, before this more narrow, if you like, right, more classic autism, which comprises both what was known low functioning and high functioning autistic people. In DSM-4, there were these impairments of social communication, a list of problems, right? Or a list of features of communication, social communication in autism. And the first one was delay in language development or total lack of spoken language. And what is more, because we know there are mute people who are not autistic, because if they cannot talk, they can use gestures, facial expressions, and so on and so forth. But in autism, nonverbal individuals, they do not attempt to compensate their lack of language through alternative modes. The next one is lack of understanding that language is a tool for communication. And this is a very interesting feature, by the way. You know, even verbal autistic individuals, when they are children, they do not understand that language, what we say, is a tool for communication. For many of them, these are just sounds. The next feature is lack of reciprocity in conversations and difficulty to initiate or maintain a conversation with others. They may be able to ask for their own needs, but have a great difficulty in talking about their emotions, feelings, or understanding thoughts, beliefs of their own and those of other people. And idiosyncratic language. So that's what we used uh, many years ago in this DSM-4. And let us start with lack of language, so-called nonverbal or minimally verbal autistic children and adults. There are two main characteristics of this. Lack of use and understanding of gesture, vocal intonation, facial expression as tools of communication. And another one, and it is a more difficult, inadequate emotional reaction to verbal and non-verbal approaches by others. It means you never know. Sometimes you say something, right? And the child may react with panic or frustration and or the opposite feelings, right? So this is just this difficult feature. You never know which word can be a trigger of uh, different behaviors. Okay, and when I started investigating this topic, there were several questions I put to answer. Do individuals with autism communicate? And I can tell you yes. Even nonverbal individuals communicate. What is more, they are communicating all the time. The second question was, what language do they use? And I don't mean English, German, Spanish, and so on. I mean their autistic languages. We just don't understand them. And the last one, what should we do to establish meaningful communication with them? So let us start with nonverbal communication. By the way, these are the most fascinating topic because I do love to work with nonverbal people. They are so different, and that's make it amazing. You know, when you discover different ways to understand and to express yourself. And I will give you just two examples, whether many people understand this nonverbal uh, communication of nonverbal people. This is Lucy Blackman. She is an Australian young woman, nonverbal. And she wrote a book. If you have a chance, please read it. Lucy's story. And in this book, she described her early years. And she writes, I was sitting on the potty on the kitchen floor because I wanted. Can you guess what Lucy wanted to get or to express when she brought her potty to the kitchen where her minder was cooking? And I give you just a few seconds. Think, what can it be? And the answer is, the right answer is, she wanted something to eat. And Lucy further explained, because her babysitter started looking after her at the time of her toilet training. So she bribed Lucy to sit there with food. She was cooking and gave Lucy something to eat while she was sitting on the potty. So for Lucy, there was this connection, and when she wanted to ask for food, she took her potty to the kitchen and sat on it. I think so logical. That's what I find in all these nonverbal individuals. They're very logical, and if you understand what is going on, how they interpret everything, uh, uh, it it will be easy to communicate with them. Now, verbal communication, even those who can talk, who are echolalic or whatever, sometimes those with whom they live or work, they don't understand their communication. And I'll give you an example from Naoki Higashida, a young man from Japan, also nonverbal. Perhaps now he can say a few words. He wrote about the girl, an autistic nonverbal girl, who approached her classmates and said, I quote, all of us, her classmates, were confused. They tried to interpret. They knew that she was autistic and whatever, and they tried to interpret. And they decided perhaps she wanted to join in with us. Of course, they were wrong, because the girl, for her, all of us, came from something the teacher said earlier on the day. And the teacher said, tomorrow all of us are going to the park. What the girl wanted to find out was when they were going. And the only words she could utter were all of us. She tried her best. Again, because we don't understand it, it doesn't mean nonverbal autistic people are not communicating. And social communication is even much more difficult, right? Because non-autistic people like teachers, for example, or social workers are often puzzled by their odd, they say, strange communication. However, autistic children and adults may be equally puzzled by their non-autistic communicative partner. So, what do we need to communicate successfully? First, shared experiences and shared knowledge. Here, I want to emphasize again how important it is to know about differences in sensory perception and their development in this field, because their senses work differently, because their brain works differently. They see, feel, hear different from us, and that is why their development of communication is also different. Like, look at these two cartoon characters. They are talking about the object in front of them, and this is a ball. Yes, the experiences of these characters are different with this object. For one, it was playing football. For the other, it was, for example, playing with a ball on the beach. But still, there is enough in common to talk about it. But what if one of these characters is autistic and his experiences with this object is very different? Of course, you have no shared knowledge and you have problems in communication. The question is, where does the shared knowledge come from? And again, we will start with sensations, right? First, we see, hear, feel something. Then it is interpretation and comprehension. We construct, we create these concepts, and we know what to do about it, right? But there are two different routes from sensation to comprehension. Those whose sensory perception is different, they start with sensory concepts, sensory percepts and sensory concepts. The majority, it is verbal concepts. By the way, there are these two different roots present in all people, but one of them will be dominant. For example, for neurotypical development, right? The dominant side of the interpretation is a verbal one. And in autism, sensory interpretation may be dominant. For example, look at this, how many? 6 creatures and 1 slot, right? These creatures are different in color, perhaps, in smell, in patterns and whatever, but they all will go through this one slot because in this typical development, we learn to recognize concepts. This is a cat, or in this case, 6 cats. So the interpretation is verbal. But if somebody with autism whose sensory interpretation is very different, all these creatures cannot be cats because they are so different. That is why they are so literal. If a tiny bit is different, it cannot be a cat. If it moves differently, it cannot be a cat, and so on and so forth. At the very early stage of development. To give you an idea what it is like to be literal in perceptions, right? Just to see, just only feel sensation, right? Look at these words, but don't read the words. Read the colors. Try to read the colors, like green, yellow, red, black, and so on. It is difficult, isn't it? Because we are not literal. We see words, but not the colors. But if I give you this list of words, it is much easier, isn't it? Because if we don't understand words, we can read the colors easily, right? So this is literal perception. And what it means is for those autistic people, children, who are at the stage of literal perception, verbal words have no meaning. They're just sounds, perhaps beautiful sounds, right? Or auditory toys, even those who start repeating the words, or just listening to different words. These are the toys to play with. I'll give you a couple of examples, a couple of quotes. One is from Tito. I did not have the faintest idea that the words should mean anything. They were just patterns of sounds to me, wonderful sounds. So this is non-verbal individual. And now Donna Williams, high-functioning autistic. When I was a kid, words were sound, like the TV, like crumpled paper, like water, like gravel. Words were sensory material. They didn't have a use. They were just there. So these were meaningless sounds. And that is why, while working or living with these nonverbal and echolalic individuals, we have to learn how to understand the mind of these people who are completely, for example, nonverbal. We have to leave the world of thinking in words. And it can be quite challenging for many people. Because for the majority of people, Words are their native language, and so it is very difficult for them to step outside this very basic way of relating and imagine something else. And that's why it is difficult, but we have to learn how to try just to imagine the world of sensory based thoughts. What would thinking in touch be like? Or if we relate to the world through the sense of smell only, how would the world feel to you? And this is challenging, but a very good exercise. Okay, literal perception, literal interpretation, and sensory words. Does it mean they have no words? They do have words, sensory based words. I love this example from Donna Williams. The word cat, because Donna had two words for the concept, right? For this creature, cat. And this one was fush. It defined a cat by the sound made by your hand while stroking the creature. And the other word was brook. It is by the noise which came out of the creature when it was stroked, that is purring. So you see, I'm preparing you for autistic sensory-based languages. They do have a language, sensory-based language. They do have sensory words. So the characteristics, of course, as I said, literalness, right? Uh, Perceptual or sensory concepts, always the something. If a child, for example, remembers a dog as a small white Pekingese in a blue collar, any other dog, even a Pekingese in a red collar, cannot be identified as a dog because it is so different. And look at this, for example. You teach the child, a young child, nonverbal child, uh, the language, words. You give the child this ball. And yes, the child will learn. Oh, yes, perhaps the child will smell it, play with it, and whatever, touch it. And the child will remember this is a ball. They're very clever. But the next day, you bring this object and say, this is a ball. Sorry, it isn't. It cannot be a ball. It is very, very different. Not only by size, but it is heavier, color different, and so on. Or, for example, if this is a spoon, that one cannot be a spoon. And the child, this is a plate, this is a different thing if it is of different color. And it is very logical, isn't it? What I find, everything is very, very logical. And do they stay at this stage? No, they also move on, of course. But it is a later transition from sensory to symbolic plane of comprehension. Some autistic individuals remain fluent in both languages, and verbal and sensory based. This is from Donna Williams. In my case, I remember the transition from the system of sensing into the system of interpretation began to happen not in the first days or weeks of life as usual, but at around 3 years old. It was not until around the age of 10 that the system of interpretation eventually came to be relied upon. Even then, it was taken on not as a first and primary language, but as a secondary one, a foreign one, right? And much later as one of two equal but different primary systems. Again, now you see autistic languages are sensory based. Remember, I'm talking about autism before DSM-5. On the cognitive level, there was this research by an Australian researcher, Alan Snyder. He defined autism as the state of delayed acquisition of concepts. And the main arguments of his were, we are not conscious of the details of percepts. Instead, we often see or what we expect to see, or what is closer to our mental representations. For example, if you look at this illustration, what is it? I believe some, or perhaps the majority, will say that it is a triangle, but it is not. There is no triangle there. There are these three black shapes, right? But because we've got the concept of triangle, that's what we recognize. If you don't know triangles, squares, and whatever, you wouldn't recognize it, right? And why I am talking about it? Because to teach nonverbal, especially nonverbal, or echolalic children words and concepts, we have to show them many different objects, the same objects, but different size, colors, and so on and so forth. Practice, exposure, and experience with objects and around objects matter a great deal. Many of them say it. For example, for the person of autism to understand the concept of a cat, they have to see more than one cat, many different cats. A dog or street, they have to see many specific dogs or streets before the concept could be formed. And so this is the first part of our investigation. In the next one, we will talk about the second important point, that it's not only about shared knowledge. Yes, we have to have shared experiences and shared knowledge, but also shared tool of communication. Till next time.